Good evening. I'm Andrew Cheng.
And I'm Adrienne Arsenault. Tonight, a guilty verdict in an attack which stunned the country. Reaction from the families of the victims.
It's like you're holding your breath for 3 years and you can finally breathe.
And why the judge refused to use the attacker's name.
Why the light at the end of the tunnel looks a little bit brighter for Canadian vaccinations.
We're very optimistic that we're going to be able to accelerate some of these timelines.
A 12-hour rescue off Canada's east coast.
This was one of the craziest rescues that I've been a part of.
How everyone made it off this boat alive.
I just kept saying to myself, this is a miracle. It's a miracle.
Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I can hear you, Thomas. Nice to meet you. You can hear me okay?
And doing a lot of this lately, why it can be so exhausting, physically and mentally. This is The National. For people in Toronto and right across the country, April 23rd, 2018 is remembered as a day full of chaos and confusion and grief.
In a single deliberate act, one man murdered 10 people and injured so many more by running them down with a van along a Yonge Street sidewalk. Today, a judge found Alek Minassian guilty of 10 counts of first-degree murder and 16 counts of attempted murder. All that violence from one man.
But there was a conscious push to shift the focus today away from him and onto the people, as young as 22, as old as 94, who died in that attack.
The day also belongs to the injured and all those who've been changed forever. That was a major point in the judge's ruling today. In fact, she didn't name the killer at all. Uighur Miliotis is outside the courthouse tonight. So, Uighur, can you walk us through this day?
Adrienne, until now, this trial was held entirely on Zoom because of COVID, and it focused specifically on the state of mind of a killer. But today ended with a tribute to his victims and to those left behind, some of whom had gathered here at the courthouse to watch the judge deliver her verdict online.
Chul Min Kang.
Crown Prosecutor Joe Callahan began by reciting the names of the victims as survivors and families of those who died filed out quietly. Some stood by, others spoke to who today's verdict was about.
Not a day goes by that you don't think about the person you've lost. And
Nick D'Amico's sister, Anne-Marie, was killed in the attack.
It's like you're holding your breath for 3 years and you can finally breathe. I don't really know how else to explain it.
The horror of that day, the intent behind it, was never in question. Court heard Alek Minassian plan to use a van to mow down people deliberately. The only issue, did he understand what he did was legally and morally wrong? Minassian's controversial defense hinged on his diagnosis of autism. His lawyer argued the disorder rendered him unable to fully appreciate what he did was wrong, and therefore he was not criminally responsible for his actions. But in her ruling, Justice Anne Malloy concluded the evidence pointed to someone who understood his deadly rampage on this street would have devastating consequences, but that his desire for infamy was greater. In an extraordinary step, it's why the judge said she would refer to the accused only as John Doe. His attack on these 26 victims that day was an act of a reasoning mind, she said, notwithstanding its horrific nature and notwithstanding that he has no remorse for it and no empathy for his victims. I find John Doe guilty on all counts on the indictment.
We're pleased with this verdict.
Those in the autism community were bracing for a different outcome.
We were concerned that our work to do in destigmatizing those with autism would be greater if the results had gone the other way today.
Back at the courthouse, this ends a terrible chapter.
It's going to be a long journey, but I'm going to get there.
Kathy Riddell was injured in the attack.
He can spend the rest of his life in jail because he deserves it.
Minassian's defense wouldn't say for sure, but hinted an appeal could be likely. A court date has been set for later this month to discuss next steps.
And Uighur, it seems that the judge also spent some time today laying out the impact of this attack on those who survived.
She did, Adrienne. She outlined their names and their injuries, going specifically into some details: broken pelvis, head trauma, broken limbs. And it was all, again, part of the focus of today that put the attention to the victims and not the killer.
All right, Uighur, thanks very much.
Well, to Canada's vaccine rollout now. The Trudeau government has long said that any Canadian who wants to be vaccinated will be by September. That is still 6 months away. But the Prime Minister couldn't stop dropping hints about that timeline.
It's possible those timelines move forward. It's possible that those timelines be moved forward. We're also very optimistic that they're going to be able to be moved forward.
But there is still a long way to go. The bar to hit herd immunity is a vaccination rate of around 70%. But after months of vaccinations, less than 1.5% of Canadians have received their full 2 doses. So now some provinces have decided that getting that second dose on time is perhaps less important than getting as many first doses into as many arms as possible. And that tactic now has the official blessing of the federal government. Christine Birak shows us the risks, the benefits, and the science behind delaying that second dose.
You still need 2 doses, but in some provinces, instead of 4 weeks apart, you might get them up to 4 months apart.
This will allow us to protect close to 40,000 extra people with 1 dose of a highly effective vaccine by the end of March.
Now, Canada's National Advisory Committee on Vaccines says that plan is fine, saying while studies have not yet collected 4 months of data on vaccine effectiveness after the first dose, the first 2 months of real-world effectiveness are showing sustained high levels of protection. That's more confidence than we heard just days ago.
Science evolves. We learn more. So what I told you last week was this, because that's what we knew. Now we know more.
The Lancet has just released this study out of the UK examining the effectiveness of a single dose in frail adults. Early results found that after 3 months, a single dose of Pfizer or Oxford AstraZeneca's vaccine led to a 70 to 80% drop in the risk of COVID-19 related hospitalization in elderly, frail patients.
If it can do this well in the frail elderly that are a wreck, okay, it's perfectly okay for the rest of us.
Once a COVID vaccine has shown your immune system a tiny piece of the virus, your body builds defenses that can last for months.
We don't know for sure that their immunity will stay high for the whole 4 months, so there may be a window of vulnerability when their immunity lags.
The second dose usually boosts that protection, so there are risks.
If we're giving too many people a delay in the second dose of vaccine, those people may get infected anyway and pass it on to other people.
That concern also extends to variants. Most doctors say older and immunocompromised people should be given their vaccines as directed by the drug company. As for everyone else, get 1 dose now and get the second as soon as it's offered. Christine Birak, CBC News, Toronto.
Now, at the same time, provinces stretch their vaccine supply further. There are fresh signs that supply is going to skyrocket, with more vaccine going to more Canadians. David Cochran shows us what that means for those immunity timelines.
The first AstraZeneca Covishield shipment from India arrived at dawn. 500,000 doses closer to vaccinating the country.
We're very optimistic that we're going to be able to accelerate some of these timelines.
The working timeline is end of September, but with provinces delaying second doses and supplies ramping up, acceleration seems likely. After a slow start, Canada is on track to reach its 6 million Pfizer and Moderna doses by the end of March. By May, there should be 2 million AstraZeneca Covishield doses from India. By June, another 1.9 million AstraZeneca doses through the COVAX agreement. Also by June, another 10.8 million Pfizer doses and 12.2 million Moderna. A total of 32.9 million doses before Canada Day, enough to give every adult a single shot.
We are working very, very hard to get more vaccines more quickly.
Canada, under Mr. Trudeau's leadership, is behind many third world developing countries.
It's still too slow for critical premiers, especially when compared to the United States.
We're now on track to have enough vaccine supply for every adult in America by the end of May.
That pace is the envy of Canada. The U.S. won't loosen its grip on its vaccine supply until it meets its own needs. But if it hits that May target, it's in its economic interest to do so.
The next step is economic recovery, and that is in ensuring that our neighbors, Mexico and Canada, have similarly managed the pandemic so that we can open our borders and build back better.
Canada should get doses from the United States this spring when it finalizes further deliveries from AstraZeneca. That should boost its supply by millions of doses, as could the approval of the Johnson & Johnson vaccine, which is expected within 2 weeks. David Cochrane, CBC News, Ottawa.
Now, even the most optimistic timeline still leaves Canada vulnerable and likely dealing with the fallout from the pandemic for a long time. So the government is extending benefits.
We are extending the Canada Emergency Wage Subsidy and the Canada Emergency Rent Subsidy and lockdown support at their current levels until June.
Now, the wage subsidy helps employers with their workers' wages so they can keep them on the payroll. The rent subsidy helps tenants stay in their homes. Last month, the government also extended other programs, including the Canada Recovery Benefit. That's the successor to the CERB. Well, Air Canada has agreed to refund passengers who had their flights canceled or postponed during the pandemic. As first reported by the Toronto Star, the airline has agreed to the terms as part of ongoing talks with Ottawa over an airline industry bailout package. Air Canada has previously said it's followed the guidance of the Canadian Transport Agency and offered vouchers or credits instead of refunds for the thousands of flights that have been canceled.
Canada's former military ombudsman says he warned the defense minister years ago about allegations of sexual misconduct against the former chief of the defense staff, General Jonathan Vance. Murray Brewster with what the former watchdog says happened in a closed-door meeting.
Ever since the explosive misconduct allegations against General Jonathan Vance surfaced, the questions have been asked. What did the Liberal government know, and when? Today, some clarity.
I did tell the minister what the allegation was. I reached into my pocket to show him the evidence I was holding, and he pushed back from the table, said no.
Today, Gary Walborn told a parliamentary committee about a March 1st, 2018 meeting with Defence Minister Harjit Sajjan, where he says he warned the minister someone had made an informal complaint of sexual misconduct against Vance. Walborn had given the woman his assurance of confidentiality. He'd asked the minister to respect that. The next thing he knew, the Privy Council office was asking for her details. He refused.
We did not have information that would have allowed any action to be taken.
CBC News reported many of these details last month, quoting confidential sources. It is, however, the first official public acknowledgement of what was said in the meeting and draws Harjit Sajjan's actions into question. Tonight, the minister insisted he did the right thing. I disagree with parts of the testimony that occurred in committee today. As I have stated, I was as shocked as everyone else at the allegations that were made public last month. Liberals on the Defence Committee questioned what Sajjan could have done about an informal allegation where the complainant didn't want to come forward. Experts say there were options open to him.
The Ombudsman reported these allegations to the Minister of National Defence because he lacked the authority to investigate these allegations. From that point onwards, the matter rested with the minister, who, in my opinion, had a duty to investigate.
Just last week, General Vance's successor, Admiral Art MacDonald, stepped aside when a misconduct investigation involving him was revealed. The former ombudsman and opposition critics say that is how it should have been handled with General Vance. Murray Brewster, CBC News, Ottawa.
Well, turning now to New York, where Governor Andrew Cuomo apologized today over allegations of sexual harassment. But the defiant governor is refusing to resign. Stephen D'Souza has a look at Cuomo's recent fall from grace.
I certainly never, ever meant to offend anyone.
New York Governor Andrew Cuomo's voice quavered slightly today as he faced the cameras for the first time since being hit with 3 accusations of inappropriate behavior.
I truly and deeply apologize. I am embarrassed.
It's been a rough few months for Cuomo, embroiled by scandal over his handling of nursing homes, accused of covering it up. Then, in the last week, 3 women, 2 of whom work for the state, have accused Cuomo of unwanted touching and kissing and sexual harassment.
I never touched anyone inappropriately. We have good news, bad news.
It's a stark reversal of fortune for a politician who relished in the spotlight during the height of the pandemic. Cuomo's humorous and informative daily updates filled a void left by then-President Trump, even won Cuomo an Emmy. But many political observers say that kinder person didn't match the bullying presence that's marked Cuomo's career.
Well, I would say the governor is facing the biggest scandal of his political career. And so we saw him at the most contrite we've ever seen him.
Critics say Cuomo is avoiding taking responsibility. Lindsey Boylan, a former state official who accused Cuomo of an unwanted kiss, tweeting, "How can New Yorkers trust you, New York Governor Cuomo, to lead our state if you don't know when you've been inappropriate with your own staff?"
He's kind of pleading ignorance that strains credibility, because this is a governor who signed into law some very significant anti-harassment laws.
Cuomo says he's not resigning, even as bipartisan calls for his impeachment grow.
I don't think that it's possible for the governor to continue in his position while he is under this investigation.
Cuomo's political fate is now in the hands of his attorney general, who will appoint an independent investigator. The results of that investigation could determine if he remains in office. Stephen D'Souza, CBC News, New York.
At a U.S. Senate hearing today, new details emerged about what went wrong on January 6th. The National Guard says it was not only ready, but asked to help crush the insurrection at the Capitol. And that request then took hours to approve. Katie Simpson now with the reasons why.
Security around the Capitol is being ramped up yet again. Police say they're aware of a fresh threat, a potential repeat attack.
Truth, so help you God.
It comes as defense and intelligence officials offered new explanations as to what went so wrong on January 6th.
At 1:49 p.m., I received a frantic call from then Chief of United States Capitol Police Stephen's son. Chief's son, his voice cracking with emotion, indicated that there was a dire emergency at the Capitol.
The head of the D.C. National Guard says within 20 minutes of that call, he could have had 155 troops at the Capitol. It didn't happen, he says, because the Army and Defense secretaries took more than 3 hours to approve an emergency request for help.
What would have been the impact of sending those 155 right around that 2 o'clock time frame?
I believe that number could have made a difference. We could have helped extend the perimeter and help push back the crowd.
A senior defense official testified military leaders wanted to know more about what the troops would be doing on the ground. But Major General William Walker says there were other reasons for the delay.
The Army senior leaders did not think that it looked good, it would be a good optic. They further stated that it could incite the crowd.
When the National Guard was requested last June to deal with anti-racism protests, Walker says there was no such resistance.
Were you able to immediately receive approval from the Secretary of the Army and the Secretary of Defense to deploy National Guard to assist law enforcement at that time?
Senator Peters, I was. Yes, sir.
To prevent this kind of attack from happening again, the U.S. Capitol Police Service says it needs more funding and more officers.
The possibility of a similar incident occurring in the current environment is a very clear and present danger.
Okay, well, that's worrying. Katie, you're outside the U.S. Capitol. What more do we know about this new threat?
Well, it's concerning enough, Adrian, that the House has canceled its session for tomorrow. Capitol Police say they're aware of a militia group and a possible plot targeting the complex here. Tomorrow is March 4th. It's the original inauguration date laid out in the Constitution. And some conspiracy theorists are promoting the conspiracy theory it's the day former President Donald Trump will return to power. So security is being stepped up. And after coming down just a few days ago, razor wire is starting to be put up again on the fences around the building. Adrian.
All right, Katie Simpson outside the U.S. Capitol tonight. Thank you, Katie.
Well, Donald Trump was the focus of attention at the ongoing extradition hearing of Huawei executive Meng Wanzhou. Meng's lawyers are pushing for her case to be dropped because of what Trump said while he was president, saying he would intervene if it would help the U.S. reach a trade deal with China. They say that, along with comments by Prime Minister Trudeau regarding Meng and the 2 Canadians imprisoned in China, show political interference. The Prime Minister reiterated his belief today that China concocted the charges against Canadians Michael Kovrig and Michael Spavor shortly after Meng's arrest in Vancouver.
It is obvious that the 2 Michaels were arrested on trumped-up national security charges days after we fulfilled our extradition treaty responsibilities.
His comments came in response to China's ambassador's claims that the cases are not linked.
It is not an admission China wants to make to the world, but a report has emerged that was not supposed to become public. And as Sasha Petrusek tells us, that report reveals details of forced relocation of the country's Uighurs and other ethnic minorities.
Behind high fences, they work in shoe and textile factories across China. Ethnic Uighurs, part of China's large Muslim minority, spread thousands of kilometers from their homes in Xinjiang province. Documents and videos now suggest a government relocation scheme on a massive scale. A video on state TV shows Chinese officials in a Xinjiang village trying to recruit workers to ship out. No one volunteers. They tell this young woman her future here is hopeless. Will you go? She says no. Propaganda and heavy persuasion follows before she and others reluctantly agree to leave behind their Uighur culture, says Adrian Zenz, who uncovered a government report written by Chinese academics.
So it's a systematic uprooting, a tearing through to break up that identification.
The report says it is an important method to influence, melt, and assimilate Uyghur minorities. And it is coercive, says Zenz.
Forced labor is a crime against humanity, not just a money-making scheme. And of course, this feeds into perceptions and definitions of genocide.
In the opinion of the House,
last month, Canada's Parliament did label it a genocide, though Prime Minister Justin Trudeau and Cabinet abstained from the vote. Trudeau was asked about this again today.
We have and will continue to take very seriously the very credible reports of human rights abuses in Xinjiang, in China, perpetrated against the Uyghurs by the Chinese state.
Beijing has denied these accusations as lies of the century and dismissed this latest report as nothing more than the opinions of academics. Sasha Petrusek, CBC News, Toronto.
Well, Buckingham Palace says it is very concerned about claims of bullying made against the Duchess of Sussex, and it promises to investigate. The complaints involving 3 former staffers date back to 2018 when Meghan and Prince Harry were living at Kensington Palace. In a statement, a spokesperson for the Duchess said she is saddened by this latest attack on her character. It comes just days before Oprah Winfrey's big interview with the couple airing in the U.S. A bit of an update today on Prince Philip's condition. It came from his daughter-in-law, Camilla, the Duchess of Cornwall, as she toured a vaccination center. The 99-year-old prince has been in hospital for 3 weeks, undergoing treatment for an infection and a pre-existing heart condition.
Hundreds of Canadian women say a controversial birth control device left them in debilitating pain.
I didn't know I was going to be stuck in my bed for as many years as I was.
Next, a Fifth Estate investigation, why the company settled in the U.S. but is promising a fight in Canada.
A dramatic operation off the coast of Nova Scotia. Dozens of fishermen pulled from a boat taking on water in stormy seas.
This was one of the craziest rescues that I've been a part of.
And a year of virtual calls takes a toll.
Neck pain, back pain, shoulder pain.
The simple tips to fight that Zoom fatigue. We're back in 2. Thousands of women in Canada and the United States say they suffered serious medical problems after using a controversial birth control device. But only women in the U.S. are receiving compensation. A Fifth Estate investigation has found the company behind the device has no plans to settle in Canada. As Vicadopia reports, the women are not backing down.
After Carrie Paunace was implanted with Essure in 2012, she says pain started within months.
I didn't know I was going to be stuck in my bed for as many years as I was, and Essure is like the worst thing I've ever been through.
Unlike tubal ligation surgery, implanting Essure coils is relatively fast and easy. Removing them is not.
My uterus has been taken out. I'm upset because I feel like there's still a part of me missing, right?
Critics say disclosing reports of side effects has long been a problem with Essure. Even as recently as last summer, Essure's owner's Bayer was found to have sat on thousands of women's complaints of injuries that it failed to disclose in the U.S. They came out only after U.S. women filed lawsuits against the company. Bayer disputes it was obliged to make the complaints public.
If we had have known that there were many patients who were experiencing difficulty, we could have been looking into this and investigating it much more diligently.
More than 700 women across the country have gone after Bayer Canada for compensation. The company doesn't admit any liability despite pulling the device off the market in 2017. In the U.S., the company agreed to pay $1.6 billion to settle thousands of lawsuits. But in a statement to the Fifth Estate, it said the settlement in the U.S. reflects a commercial decision. It has no impact on pending Canadian litigation, and Bayer intends to defend itself vigorously. The Canadian women's lawyers expect to see the company in court.
Just to get some sort of justice for these women who have lost so much.
As for Carrie Paunace, she's at least recovered an important part of her life. Vic Adopia, CBC News, Toronto.
Tune in tomorrow night for the Fifth Estate's full investigation into the story No More Tears, the Essure Legacy, airs Thursday on CBC Television at 9 and streams on CBC Gem.
Well, next, the potential for rapid COVID tests in Canada.
We can catch it early and stop the spread of the virus.
We explore why it could be as simple as a trip to the grocery store, but also the risk of relying on them too much.
And a fishing boat in distress, taking on water in high winds and high seas. We'll hear from the crew that rescued dozens of fishermen on board.
Well, health experts have long warned that rapid tests are not a silver bullet in stopping the spread of COVID-19. But we are starting to learn more about how they can be useful in reducing risk. Joanna Remiliotis looks at why some businesses are banking on rapid tests.
I just get you to line up against the wall here, kind of spaced out.
At a Halifax hotel, a new send-off to sea.
All right, you're all ready to go?
A COVID test before these men and the rest of the 35-person clam harvesting crew set off together. It's a little discomfort now, but they'll get a result back within the day, and the peace of mind that comes with it.
Making sure we take that extra level of precaution was for us to sleep at night, but also for our employees and their families, knowing that we're doing everything we possibly can to make sure that they're safe and the vessel's safe, and they're coming home, in a safe manner.
Tony Jabbour is Vice President of Fleet Operations for Clearwater. Last fall, the seafood company invested in mobile PCR tests, like the ones used in public health labs to detect genetic material of the COVID-19 virus. Only these deliver results in a couple of hours. It's an added measure, Clearwater says, to stay safe and stay afloat.
When you go on board of a vessel, we do social distancing, staggered meals, that type of stuff, but you cannot 100% social distance. And then you're at sea for 35 days. So it was really important that to add that to our screening process and make sure we don't have an asymptomatic case that gets on one of the vessels and we have a major outbreak. It would be catastrophic.
From fisheries to pharmacies, COVID tests are being used in dozens of sites across the country and being tested to for wider use.
Are you experiencing any of the following symptoms? Fever?
In Mississauga, this Shoppers Drug Mart is part of a new pilot project. Its parent company, Loblaw, is offering rapid tests to employees in nearly 20 of its pharmacies and retail locations in Ontario and Alberta. The test used here is designed to pick up antigens in someone infected with COVID. With a shorter swab, antigen tests are less invasive and deliver results in a matter of minutes. They're not as sensitive as the gold standard PCR test, but they're easy and quick, And pharmacist Mohamed El Sabakhawi says that makes them ideal for screening purposes.
Because of the nature of COVID, there are asymptomatic people going around. They could be spreading the virus not knowing. The value that this can bring is we can catch it early and stop the spread of the virus.
Danica Gettin-Kerr has been working throughout the pandemic and has lived with the stress of potentially bringing COVID home.
I have my 2-year-old and I have my mom who's high risk. So for me, it's really awesome knowing that I'm not putting them at risk.
She and other employees get tested twice a week.
Knowing that we are in an environment providing care for other people that are sick, and we need to be careful. We need to make sure that we are taking higher precautions than the normal person would.
Ottawa has delivered nearly 17 million rapid antigen tests to provinces over the past few months, but only a fraction have been used so far. Part of the reluctance is rapid antigen tests aren't as reliable as the PCR tests used in hospitals and test centers. But there is growing interest to find out how useful rapid tests can be. Pensionnat de Saint-Nom-de-Marie is one of 2 schools in Montreal where students are randomly tested every day and will be until the end of the school year. The goal is to identify and contain any asymptomatic cases as quickly as possible. The study was proposed by a doctor who is also a school parent.
We are all wanting our children to go to school and to be in school.
Dr. Caroline Quash is a pediatric infectious disease specialist at Saint-Justin Hospital. Quash wants to determine how useful rapid tests can be when used regularly in a controlled environment. The plan is to verify any positive samples with a PCR test and also sequence those samples to find out where the infection came from.
In a classroom, when you have a case and you screen the students around them, you might be able to find, secondary transmission right away. And so you can act more quickly on that child's family, their siblings, if they're in school already.
The growing interest in rapid tests, the reality of the resources needed to use them more widely, is prompting real-time solutions.
It was really essential for us to be able to get this up and running and support the testing. Obviously doing a great job with your technique.
Curtis Abb is the acting chair of the Life Sciences Department at Red River College in Winnipeg. The college set up this condensed course in a matter of weeks to support the province's plan to offer rapid testing to teachers. These students are learning how to transfer samples for analysis. Their skills will be in demand, says Abb, and will help the province use every tool available to control the spread of COVID.
We talked to a lot of people that have had to go for COVID-19 testing and the wait times and some of the anxiety associated with that. So I think, the opportunity to have rapid tests available, to get those results faster, to give more clarity to patients in a quicker amount of time is a great thing to have and great to be a part of.
But while the value of rapid testing is promising, it is still emerging and the data is limited.
I think that the evidence base is firming up and kind of supports the initial idea that this can be useful if it's positive, but that you can't rely on it if it's negative.
Dr. Lenora Saxinger is an infectious disease expert at the University of Alberta. She says the concern is people, already weary of the pandemic, may drop their guard. Because while a positive result can be a warning sign, a negative one may result in a false sense of reassurance.
So if you get a test and it's negative, it does not mean that you do not carry the virus, and it does not mean that you might not start carrying the virus over a very short time period after the test. So you can't use it to rule out infection. Whereas I know just anecdotally that people still tend to like to rely on a test and get a test to make sure they're not infectious so that they can go do something like visit grandma or whatever. And that's exactly what we don't want to happen.
At Shoppers Drug Mart, the messaging is rapid testing is just an added layer of precaution, especially for essential workers. And Loblaw is hoping what it learns here could help it scale up.
And so we thought that this could be a possible solution to small, medium businesses to send their employees to one of our stores.
Ashish Desai is the Executive Vice President of Pharmacy and Healthcare at Shoppers Drug Mart. He says Loblaw could offer rapid testing to other companies too.
So the process could be that they've signed up to participate in this program. Their employees could go into any one of our stores, whether it's a Shoppers Drug Mart or a Loblaw pharmacy. So if I'm grocery shopping Sunday afternoon, maybe there's an opportunity for me to book a screen at that point in time.
Back in Nova Scotia, most of the crew of the Arctic Endurance is on board, ready to set off from Mulgrave for more than a month at sea. Everyone's test came back negative, and while the results here took hours rather than minutes to get back, they are more accurate. So while the weather can turn, at least on the COVID front, the coast is pretty clear. Joanna Rumeliotis, CBC News, Toronto.
We all know that thousands of Canadians have been lost to COVID-19, and CBC News has gathered tributes to some of them in a project called Lives Remembered. Well, tonight a son reflects on the impact his father had on him and on the political landscape of this country.
My name is Bedard. My dad's name was Marc-Andre Bedard. He passed away of COVID November 25th, 2020. Marc-Andre was born in Lac-Saint-Jean in a very small village of a family of 9 children. I think that deep inside him, this question about ethics and this question about helping ordinary people has always been at the heart of his engagement. He was one of the founders of the PQ at the end of the 60s with René Lévesque, but in 76 became Minister of Justice. Marc-Andre would certainly tell you that his most important accomplishment was to accompany Quebec people in this quest for equality and eventually for nationhood. He also changed the family law to establish the complete equality of spouses and later on forbidding discrimination against people for their sexual orientation. I had this incredible privilege to grow up with my idol. I was living with him. My mother and my father had been able throughout this career that was high intensity one to distribute a lot of love. I will miss his presence. His smartness. I would call that say, hey, I get this problem. What do you think about it? And just by listening to what I had to say, he would lead me to the solution. So if I had something to tell him is stay close. I will need you.
We have many more tributes to Canadians like Marc-Andre Bedard. Their stories are being told through our interactive website. You can find it at cbc.ca/remembered.
When we come back, a 12-hour rescue mission off the coast of Nova Scotia. Dozens of fishermen stranded at sea, their boat taking on water. We're going to hear how they all got off alive next. Well, now to a story of high drama on the high seas. All 31 crew members on a Canadian fishing boat are safe tonight after a daring helicopter rescue. Last night, the Atlantic Destiny was 220 kilometers off Yarmouth, Nova Scotia, when it ran into trouble, on fire, out of power, and taking on water. Kayla Hounsell picks up the story.
The Atlantic Destiny, a scallop fishing vessel thrashing about in high winds and 8-meter seas.
The boat was rolling back and forth.
Philip Morales is in that chopper. He's with the United States Coast Guard.
We get there and the boat's taking on water and the pump wasn't working.
Together with Canadians, he spent the night trying to rescue the 31 people in peril, extracting them from the vessel one by one, performing the delicate maneuver over and over. It took 12 hours to get everyone to safety.
This was one of the craziest rescues that I've been a part of for the situation and and how many hoists that we had to do and how challenging it was trying to con the aircraft to be able to get the survivors picked up.
The fire knocked out the vessel's power and then the ship started taking on water. The captain and several crew initially stayed behind, trying to pump the water out. They eventually realized they couldn't keep up and abandoned the vessel. It later sank.
We can deal with a vessel in the future, but if we had lost a life, that would be far, far worse.
Every time the house shook from wind here, I just thought, how much worse is that on the water?
Hannah Fancy's brother Tyler was on board.
Immediately you go to the worst case scenario. When you have a loved one that's out at sea, you know the risks and you know them really well because as we've seen before, time and time again, bad things do happen.
Her mind went to the most recent tragedy. 6 Nova Scotia fishermen died at sea just before Christmas. Fancy says she still thinks of them. Her brother finally made it to shore at 3 a.m.
I just kept saying to myself, this is a miracle. It's a miracle. So much could have happened, so much more could have gone wrong, and we were this close to losing them.
A dramatic rescue with all souls on board safe, under circumstances that all too often have a different outcome. Kayla Hounsell, CBC News, Chelsea, Nova Scotia.
Next, turns out all those Zoom calls are taking a toll.
It's like walking around with a mirror hanging in front of us.
The simple thing you can do to make all this screen time feel a little less exhausting. Welcome back. For Canadians working from home, video conferencing has just become a pain in the neck, in the back, and in the shoulders. It's also made them very self-conscious about their faces as they communicate with colleagues. The Zoom fatigue is getting to us, so Thomas Degla had a look at what it's doing to us.
In this work-from-home era, this is one defining phrase.
Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I can hear you, Thomas. Nice to meet you. You can hear me okay?
Physiotherapist Matthew Lang is seeing the consequences of a full year spent by so many video conferencing all day.
Neck pain, back pain, shoulder pain, that then affect people farther and throughout their entire day because they're stuck and they're not moving.
Meeting colleagues over Zoom felt so novel a year ago when we first met Peter Flashner.
I think working from home will be a lot more of an accepted feature.
But since then,
novelty is worn off. I'd say that we've become, quite adept at this.
Normalized in movies.
Is that a glass of wine?
Yes, yeah, it is.
By world leaders, even royalty.
Thank you, Your Majesty.
Bye.
Video chat has become a fact of life for so many, and with it, that so-called Zoom fatigue. Researchers at Stanford blame the close-up eye contact, a reduction in mobility from staying in the same spot, plus the mental strain of watching for visual cues, not to mention constantly seeing yourself in real time.
This is a huge transformation to the way we normally talk. It's like walking around with a mirror hanging in front of us.
Researchers recommend shrinking the video chat window so it doesn't take up the entire screen and turning off self-view mode as often as possible.
Even as more people get vaccinated, there's a feeling virtual meetings are here to stay, blended perhaps with in-person attendance.
If we could do hybrid, that would be just great if that means more people are able to participate.
Did you hear him?
In the meantime, yes, some are still getting the hang of it.
Oh, I can see Thomas in the little gallery, but not on the big screen.
Oh, sorry, I was muted.
Thomas Dagler, CBC News, Toronto.
Okay, next on The National, a 17-year-old dog and a local photographer. The story behind how this senior pup found his forever home. Next in our moment. Well, this is Caesar. He's 17 years old and has been in palliative care at the Cape Breton SPCA since October. The SPCA was hoping to help one of their oldest residents find a new place to live. My gosh, he's adorable. And thanks to a local photographer whose photos of Caesar went viral, today he finally got to go to his forever home, and tonight it's our moment.
Caesar is a 17-year-old. He has been living at the SPCA for a few months now. He's a palliative dog, which basically means reached a certain age in his life where he's going to need medical care or special attention. He actually was adopted today. I'm a local photographer and my main thing is pet photography. I heard of Caesar through somebody that works at the SPCA and I wanted to go in and take pictures of him because right now with everything going on, the pandemic, they're not allowed to post actual photos on Facebook. So I thought, hey, if I can go in there and take some photos of him I'll post them on my Facebook and I can put them out there and people will see. And I was pleasantly surprised. As of today, there's over 2,900,000 shares. It's just really nice now knowing that he gets to go home every night and he has a person to cuddle with.
So for what we hear, Caesar is one of these dogs that's really grateful to be close to someone. They've been trying to find him a home for months. It was the pictures that did it. They couldn't post it on Facebook because they just didn't want people to come in,
right,
unannounced, as it were.
Yeah, and good on Shauna, right? She volunteered her time to do this, and my gosh, nice to see the fruits of one's labor like that. That's the National for this March 3rd. Have a great night.
Good night.